Today, we're stepping into one of the strangest chapters in agricultural history, the story of plants that spread too easily, feed too many people, and threaten the wrong kind of power. For centuries, certain crops were celebrated for their resilience, their ability to multiply on their own, and their almost supernatural strength in poor soils. Yet instead of being cherished, many of them were quietly pushed aside, labeled as weeds, restricted, or even banned. Why? Because you can't patent them, you can't fully control them, and you certainly can't turn them into corporate profit. So stay with me until the end, because some of these plants were once survival foods for entire civilizations, and today almost no one realizes how powerful they truly are.
Chufa, or tiger nuts, is the underground crop that refuses to disappear. Chufa is older than the pyramids, one of humanity's first domesticated foods, and a plant that behaves more like a quiet underground empire than a crop. From a single tuber, it sends out dozens of shoots, each forming its own cluster of nut-like roots. By autumn, what started as one becomes hundreds. It doesn't ask for fertilizer, irrigation, or rich soil. It thrives in neglect and spreads silently beneath the surface, making it almost impossible to contain once established. Ancient Africans and Iberians relied on it as a dependable survival food because it never failed, even in drought or poor land. But this same resilience made it a problem for modern agriculture. Machines can't easily harvest it, and companies can't control its spread. So instead of promoting it, the crop was quietly reclassified as a weed. Yet the plant never cared for labels. It still spreads, multiplies, and returns stronger every season, just as it did thousands of years ago.
Amaranth, the Aztec grain that conquerors couldn't kill. Amaranth was once so essential to Aztec life that it was offered in temples, carried by warriors, and grown on floating fields engineered to never dry out. When colonizers arrived, they feared its cultural power and tried to erase it. Fields were burned, seeds outlawed, and farmers punished. But Amaranth simply refused to die. It drops thousands of seeds that remain dormant until conditions are right, creating a natural seed bank that outlives drought, war, and neglect. It grows in heat that withers corn, in soil too poor for wheat, and in climates where nothing else survives. Modern agribusiness dislikes it for a similar reason. It doesn't need chemicals, irrigation, or machinery. It just grows, strong, nutritious, and unstoppable. Today, many farmers rediscover it accidentally when it returns to fields once plowed over decades ago. Amaranth is not a plant you cultivate, it's a plant you coexist with.
Purslane, the survival green with a mind of its own. Purslane is a global traveler, appearing in gardens, sidewalks, abandoned fields, and the cracks of old stone walls. But unlike most weeds, it is one of the most nutrient-dense greens ever studied, packed with omega-3s, antioxidants, and minerals rarely found in land plants. Its secret is its survival strategy. If you pull it up, tiny stem fragments can reroot. If you ignore it, it forms a dense, low carpet that shades the soil and retains moisture. Under heat waves that kill lettuce and spinach, Purslane stays crisp and green. It needs no fertilizer, no watering schedule, and no care at all. And because it can produce tens of thousands of seeds that remain viable for decades, once it arrives, it never truly leaves. For companies selling fertilizers, irrigation tools, and fragile hybrid greens, a plant like this is bad news. It grows too well, too easily, and too independently. For ordinary people, though, it's an ancient gift hiding in plain sight.
Lamb's quarters, wild spinach, the village green that industrial agriculture tried to erase. For thousands of years, lamb's quarters fed the poorest and the hardest working communities across Europe and Asia. It grew beside cottages, along pathways, in field margins, always reliable, always abundant. One plant can drop tens of thousands of seeds, creating a natural pantry that renews itself every spring. Unlike modern spinach, which demands rich soil and careful watering, lamb's quarters thrives in neglect. Drought, poor ground, cold nights, nothing slows it down. When industrial agriculture standardized leafy greens, this plant became a problem. It couldn't be patented, controlled, or forced into neat commercial rows. It grew too easily, outcompeting tender hybrid crops that needed chemical support. So it was labeled a weed. Its long history quietly erased, and entire generations forgot this wild spinach ever nourished their ancestors. Yet today, it still appears wherever soil has been disturbed, as if reminding us that food security once grew freely under our feet.
Jerusalem artichoke, or sunchoke, the tubered rebel that keeps coming back. The Jerusalem artichoke doesn't just survive, it returns with a stubborn joy that no plow, drought, or farmer's frustration can silence. Plant it once, and you've committed for life. Even if you harvest every tuber you can find, one hidden piece the size of a fingernail is enough to bring it roaring back next season. Indigenous peoples valued it because it never failed. Colonists relied on it during hard winters. But commercial farming, it hates this plant. Sunchokes spread too fast, yield too unpredictably, and refuse to grow in tidy, uniform rows. Their very resilience makes them unmanageable for large-scale production, a trait that should make them perfect for home growers. Rich in inulin, minerals, and prebiotic fiber, these tubers are one of the most nutritious root crops on the planet. Yet, because they can outcompete almost anything nearby, industries push them aside. Still, every spring, they rise again, tall, bright, and unstoppable.
Comfrey, the regenerator that heals soil faster than regulations allow. Comfrey is a plant with an ancient reputation: healer of wounds, builder of soil, engine of fertility. It grows from deep, powerful roots that mine nutrients far beneath the reach of most crops. Those nutrients rise into thick leaves that can be cut again and again, often 5 or 6 times a season, each time regrowing as if nothing happened. A single planting can last decades. Permaculturists use it to accelerate compost, feed fruit trees, and restore degraded land. But its ability to spread is legendary. Break off a root fragment underground, and it can form a new plant. This regenerative power made governments uneasy and industrial systems annoyed. Some regions banned or restricted certain varieties because they spread too aggressively, which is another way of saying they flourish without chemical help. Comfrey builds soil, creates fertility, and repairs damaged land precisely because it resists control. It's a plant that works for the earth, not for the industries built around it.
Water spinach, Ipomea aquaca, the survival green too resilient for regulators. Across Southeast Asia, water spinach is a lifeline. It grows in ditches, flooded fields, roadside puddles, even in slow-moving wastewater canals, turning the poorest land into a source of fresh, nutritious greens. It roots from a single node, spreads rapidly across the surface of water, and can regenerate from tiny stem fragments. Its adaptability, however, made regulators in parts of the United States uneasy. Water spinach spreads faster than officials can track or control, and once rooted in warm wetlands, it can overwhelm native ecosystems. Its very reliability, the reason poor communities depend on it, is the same trait that triggered bans and restrictions. But in regions where people struggle with food security, water spinach remains a silent hero, a plant that grows where nothing else will, offering vitamins, minerals, and protein-rich leaves without any fertilizer, irrigation, or soil.
Water spinach, Ipomoea aquatica, the survival green too resilient for regulators. Across Southeast Asia, water spinach is a lifeline. It grows in ditches, flooded fields, roadside puddles, even in slow-moving wastewater canals, turning the poorest land into a source of fresh, nutritious greens. It roots from a single node, spreads rapidly across the surface of water, and can regenerate from tiny stem fragments. Its adaptability, however, made regulators in parts of the United States uneasy. Water spinach spreads faster than officials can track or control, and once rooted in warm wetlands, it can overwhelm native ecosystems. Its very reliability, the reason poor communities depend on it, is the same trait that triggered bans and restrictions. But in regions where people struggle with food security, water spinach remains a silent hero, a plant that grows where nothing else will, offering vitamins, minerals, and protein-rich leaves without any fertilizer, irrigation, or soil.
Bamboo, certain species, is nature's steel, feared for its freedom. Bamboo is one of the most remarkable plants on Earth, a renewable building material, a food source, a windbreak, a soil stabilizer, and a cultural treasure across Asia. But some species possess an unrivaled superpower: underground rhizomes that spread far, fast, and unpredictably. A single planting can turn into a vast, interconnected colony that pushes through lawns, foundations, and even pavement. This unstoppable growth is why many regions restrict or ban certain types of bamboo. It cannot be easily contained, patented, or farmed in neat industrial plots. It grows too well, too fast, and too independently. Yet, for thousands of years, its strength has sustained entire civilizations, from scaffolding and housing to food and tools. Bamboo's crime is simply that it doesn't obey property lines or human plans. Where it is allowed to grow freely, it remains one of the world's most sustainable plants, a symbol of resilience, flexibility, and renewal.
Dandelion, the healer plant that corporations hate. The dandelion is a perfect example of how modern culture can rewrite the identity of a plant. Every part, root, leaf, flower, is edible and medicinal. It contains more nutrients than spinach, more antioxidants than many store-bought greens, and grows with zero effort from the gardener. A single plant can produce dozens of flowers, each scattering seeds carried effortlessly by the wind. Before industrial agriculture, dandelions were treasured. They were intentionally planted near homes for medicine, wine, and early spring vitamins. But once food became commercialized, the dandelion's independence became a threat. It grows too easily, too freely, requiring no fertilizers, pesticides, or hybrid seed packages. For companies that profit from lawn chemicals and controlled crops, the dandelion became a villain. So it was rebranded a weed, not because it lacks value, but because it doesn't depend on human industry. Despite decades of chemical warfare, it still rises each spring, defiant and golden, reminding us that true nourishment is often the hardest to destroy.